welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest foray into the listener questions mailbag. Today, we're analysing Miguel Almirón's career progression. We're asking what they put in the water in the Basque country. We're questioning managerial dress codes and much, much more. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, your friend, my friend, the Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, the Ryan Bailey. There might be other ones, but you're the only one in my heart. I am very excited for this episode, Ryan. You pulled some great questions. I spent way too long researching them because I got into the Wikipedia / Reddit / internet black hole, and I'm excited to share what I learned. None of it should be too graphic.
You mean you got stuck in a wormhole doing research for a listener question? Taylor, come on.
These are just all almost all of them are the perfect type of require research but are like fun research, and why did this happen? Explain it to me. And I really enjoy going down that route. So I apologize profusely for the maybe 45 minutes that I am alone about to talk.
Okay. Reminder, listener, fun questions, fun answers, just so you know, they're fun research. We look forward to Taylor's responses and everyone's responses here, including Mr. Joseph Lowry. Hello, Joe. How are you?
Hello. Yes, first of all, I really, really respect the energy that you just came into the show with, Taylor. I think that is exactly what we want. I will happily clear out for 45 minutes of Taylor Rockwell high on listener questions, energy, and joy. That makes me happy. Second of all, I also love these questions. I didn't go quite as far deep down the rabbit hole as Taylor did by the sounds of it. But, I saw some rabbits. I'll put it that way. I saw some rabbits along the way.
Okay, very nice. I just picture Taylor as Charlie from Always Sunny with the board with all the pins in it whenever he's researching listener questions. Is that a fair characterization, Taylor?
Spoiler alert for later in the episode when we get to Bebe. But yes, that is more or less what I did for that one, and still trying to figure out how that transfer happened.
Wonderful stuff. Also joining us, looking resplendent in his finest blue and yellow apparel, it's Graham Ruthven. Hello, Graham. How are you?
Hello, Ryan Bailey. I thought I would end my one-day boycott of you personally emphatically by wearing this Wimbledon shirt to make up for missing yesterday's episode. How are you? I feel like I haven't talked to you in ages.
It's been a minute, Graham. I'm very well, and I'm glad I've won you back after your boycott. If you're watching on YouTube, which you can do, listener, we're putting all episodes on YouTube, you'll notice that Graham is wearing the finest livery of AFC Wimbledon. I've also showed up in my Wimbledon gear today, so we're 50% Wimbledon on this podcast.
Which is probably too much Wimbledon, if we're being honest. Taylor, put on the MK Don shirt, even it up here.
It's on fire in the fireplace. I do that in honor of Brian. It didn't burn very well, but we're still trying to figure out a way.
Going to boycott you in a minute, Ruthven, if you keep up with that. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where you get our bonus content, bonus episodes, bonus video content, and access to our Discord server where all the cool kids are hanging out, and where you can submit listener questions for this here show. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Thank you to everybody who supports us via that medium. All right, let's get to it, shall we? Luke B has been on the Discord and says, can you go over the rise and fall of Miguel Almirón? A couple of years ago was looked at as an integral player for Newcastle and then just fell off, says Luke. Now he's headed back to Atlanta. Did no one else in Europe want him? Questions Luke. Joe, what do we make of Miguel Almirón's career progression? Bear in mind, he's 30. It's not as if he's 22 and still in his prime, right? We've got to take that into account.
Remember, for Joe, if you're 30 or older, you're basically already
done.
dead.
You're
a manager at that
more
point,
than halfway there at that point, no doubt about it.
You're a manager and you don't matter at that point.
Right.
Yep.
You're an assist.
Taylor, that was excellent work. Wow. All right.
I try.
I think Miguel Almirón's career path has been quite natural, and I'm curious to hear what you all think about this. There have been some interesting twists and turns along the way. He'll be 31 in 3 days, so he's still 30 until he turns 31, from the last time I checked the internet debate on that particular topic. But he is, that's how it works. I just wanted to make it clear that I wasn't contradicting Ryan, that's all. But I think it's been a lot of normal stuff. There's a lot of 31-year-olds who end up buried on the bench for a Premier League team after 4+ years of playing big minutes, which is the case for Miguel Almirón. He had a great 22-23 season, but the reality is he wasn't super productive for Newcastle. I think he endeared himself to the fans because he works really hard, and he does have some quality on the ball, but he just wasn't in Newcastle's plans anymore. And I think one of the main reasons for that, and one of the reasons why Almirón couldn't or didn't last even longer at Newcastle, again, he was there for 6 years. He was there for a long time. But I think the reason why he doesn't stick around longer and maybe doesn't have more of an impact is the timing of his move to Newcastle. When he goes to Newcastle, they're not a good team in the Premier League. When he leaves Newcastle, they have all the money that the world could ever ask for, and they can't spend it all, but they have tons of money, and they're consistently finishing much, much higher up the table, playing in more difficult competitions, and have generally improved the quality of their squad over Miguel Almiron. So if he's there a decade ago, I think you could still probably be a contributor for Newcastle and probably would have put up better numbers along the way. But at this current moment, with what's happened to Newcastle behind the scenes from an ownership standpoint, just really wasn't in their plans anymore. Reportedly, he had interest, to get to Luke's question about did anybody else want him besides Atlanta. He had some interest from Brazil, according to reports. There were reportedly other teams in England and Europe who were interested in Miguel Almiron. I think there's another component here, though, that he loves Atlanta United. He loves the city of Atlanta. There's videos. It's the classic soccer player comes back to the club that they were at before and hugs the kitchen staff video that I know we've all seen 20 different times. He's got that. Like, he is a beloved figure, not just in Atlanta, but inside Atlanta United with the literal people that are there. And he loves it. Like, he's got a young son. And Atlanta is like a much more stable environment than a lot of the other places that he could go from a soccer standpoint, and probably many others as well. He'll make a pretty penny there, and he'll actually play soccer, which to me sounds like a pretty fun next step as his career decrescendos a little bit here.
Yeah, Joe, I think you laid it all out expertly, and I would agree with everything you said. The thing that I kept going back to with this question was Mark Hughes, strangely enough. That's where we all went with this question, right?
Yep.
Mark Hughes, when he first takes over as Manchester City manager.
Appointed Carlisle manager today. I presume that's why you're bringing him up. Of
course.
The big news, Taylor, that he's Carlisle's new manager.
If you asked me to guess where he was managing and gave me 1,000 guesses, I would still be guessing after those
Taylor,
1,000.
I thought
Hey, can I
you were
guess?
going to go for the Mark Hughes play for Barcelona and then went to Atlanta United afterwards. That was what you were getting.
That did happen in the alternate timeline. Yeah, in the better timeline. That's where.
Taylor, I think he manages Carlisle. One guess. Grim, thoughts?
Hey, nailed it.
Yes.
That's why you're the expert, Joe. But when he takes over Manchester City, I think he takes over in June of 2008, and I think is brought in for what he did at Blackburn and for this idea that he can be a scrappy manager who can get more out of a team that isn't maybe going to spend a ton of money, that has ownership issues at the time. I think their owner was about to be indicted or already had been indicted and was maybe wanted for like humanitarian crimes. So then he's there, he's going to be the guy, and then there's the Abu Dhabi takeover. And they give him about a year and a half. They give him a lot of money to spend, but you get the impression that he was never really their guy. He was never going to be the guy once there is infinite money in place. And I think Almiron is the exact same situation, to Joe's point, that he's brought in by Mike Ashley, who wasn't inclined to spend a ton of money. He does drop a good chunk of change on Almiron. And Almiron doesn't really justify that except for that one season, but he does justify it with work rate and defensive action and I think just heart, and that's what Eddie Howe harnesses early on and I think gets better results out of him. But as Newcastle start to spend and bring in players who can have that heart, who can have that energy and intensity in pressing, but then can also contribute more towards goals and possession. Almiron's possession stats are pretty poor in terms of progressive passes, progressive carries, even just long passes. Short pass is good. Any other kind of pass, not really his strong suit. So I feel like he was good enough for the time, not good enough for what they need right now. And to Joe's point, Atlanta is kind of home for him, is going to make him feel comfortable, is going to give him lots of minutes. So why not go back?
Yeah, and that shift that you're talking about, Taylor, I think is embodied best by Anthony Gordon, who comes in after Almiron, accelerates at a quicker rate, takes his position. And the other thing that happened, and I think this is an important thing to note, is Eddie Howe changed what he wanted, or changed his mind on what he wanted from that front line. So Anthony Gordon was playing on the right side. He then decided to get the best out of Alexander Isak. He wanted a right footer on the right wing, Almiron being left footed. So he moved Anthony Gordon to the left. He brought in Jacob Murphy, who's been tremendous this season, and so has Alexander Isak. I think there's a chemistry between those two players. So Almiron never really had that same relationship with Isak, who is the primary difference maker in an attacking sense for this Newcastle team. So I think in a number of ways he was just squeezed out of that Newcastle side. And there was, to Joe's point, there was interest in him. A year ago in the 2024 January transfer window, he came pretty close to going to the Saudi Pro League. Al Shabab made an offer of £17 million for him. Newcastle at the time wanted £30 million for Almiron, which is a lot more than the £8 million they ended up selling him for 12 months on. So I'm not entirely sure that was the best business by Newcastle, particularly in their PSR situation. But there was also strong interest from Atletico Madrid for a couple of seasons. I think that was around the time when he was on that hot streak, which was the 2022-23 season. And Almiron's agent came out and publicly said that if the pandemic hadn't happened, if there hadn't been a knock-on from the pandemic and clubs being affected by that, then he thinks he would have gone to Atletico Madrid. That's how interested they were in him. So there was interest in Almiron. It's just things have lined up for him to go back to Atlanta, and I ain't mad at it. I'm looking forward to seeing him back in MLS this season.
And I think we've covered it well, but I just want to go back one more time and say the status of Newcastle as a club and their rise in the Premier League. It's not as I think that was a real factor here for Almiron, and it's part of the reason why he's probably not a great candidate to stick around for longer than he ends up sticking around. But also, he played a ton of minutes, even for a team that had made that transition already. This is the first year where Almiron hasn't played. I believe he started 23 games or more in the Premier League in every other full season that he's been there. He's played basically 2,000 minutes or more. I think one year was closer to 1,700, but he's played a really healthy chunk of minutes in the Premier League. So even with the context of Newcastle changing and starting to spend a little bit more and pushing higher, and even with the quality needs that they had rising for their new position inside of English soccer, I think Almiron still did himself some real credit here by sticking around for as long as he did. And again, I think his exit feels pretty natural.
There we go. Luke B, thank you indeed for your question. We go now to Clay W. Clay Dubs says, why has La Liga consistently underspent in the last several transfer windows compared to the other Big Five leagues? Are the Spanish clubs not as financially sound? Is La Liga's FFP stricter than other leagues? Or is it a lack of deep-pocketed owners? Numbers coming at you, Graham. $26 million that La Liga spent in January, according to the stats I found. That in comparison, that $26 million is compared to the Bundesliga spending $172. Liga spending $209 million. Serie A, $227 million. The Premier League, $462 million. So about 10% of the other top three big leagues, and then a lot less than the Premier League is the TLDR there, Graham. So Spain has definitely spent less. But why?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. It's not something I'd actually considered before this question from Clay on today's episode. So I'm going to try and break it down because I don't think there is particularly one easy answer that explains everything here. So where I'm going to start with this is actually Barcelona and Real Madrid. Because if you look at the numbers that you've just read out there, Ryan, and I had exactly the same numbers with the Premier League and Serie A and the other leagues around Europe, for the most part, those numbers are driven by the biggest clubs in each of those leagues, right? So Man City spend, 200 million euros on players in the Premier League. You have Juventus spending a bit of money in Serie A. So it's the big clubs that are primarily driving those numbers. And if you go to Spain, I think both Barcelona and Real Madrid are going through a moment right now where they are not spending a lot of money in terms of pure transfer fees right now. Barca, for obvious reasons, and then Real Madrid's strategy recently has been to focus on free agents and then sign them to huge contracts. So that doesn't show up in those numbers that you just rung off there. But if you look at salary bills of each of these leagues, La Liga still ranks by quite a distance, clearing away this as the second league in Europe behind the Premier League right now. And if you look at the top paid players in the world right now, the top two play in La Liga. That's Robert Lewandowski, who's the highest paid player in the world, and then Kylian Mbappe. In terms of pure salary, he's the highest paid player in the world. I think Erling Haaland has stuff in his contract that maybe in terms of actually what he takes home means he gets paid more, but Lewandowski has the biggest salary. And then it's Kylian Mbappe. 6 of the top 20 paid players play in La Liga right now, which is more than any other league, even more than the Premier League right now. And then my final point on this is I think lower down the ladder, there is a cultural difference between Spain and other leagues where so many clubs in Spain prioritise youth development and bringing through their own players over spending big money. And you can see the benefit of that in their national team and how good the players are that come through at the top level. So Real Sociedad do this obviously with the Basque policy. Athletic Club and Bilbao do it as well with their Basque policy. So there's 2 big clubs off the table here out of the equation that in another league would be spending money adding to that totaliser. I think the one exception is maybe Real Betis, who are an interesting case. They've always aspired to be this global big spending club. I think back to, who was it? Was it Denilson? They spent a lot of money back in the day in the 2000s. He was the most expensive player in the world for like a season or two when he went to Real Betis. So, and actually I think a large portion of that 26 million euros that you talked about there, Ryan, came from Real Betis. Like, Cucho's got to be in that, and there's a couple other signings in that as well. So there's a conflation of a few factors there that I think are quite interesting. But ultimately, Real Madrid and Barcelona not spending, I think, is the biggest factor here.
I wish listeners, sorry, Joe, just to say, I wish listeners could see all of our blank faces when Graham asked. It's Danielson, right? We were just like, sure.
Yeah.
Yes,
If you think so, Graham, it probably is Danielson. Let's just put it that way.
Sure, that's right.
I'm curious, Graham. I think those are all great responses and absolutely get at some of this.
There's a butt coming.
No, not even that. I'm curious to ask you more because my first thinking in answering this question was this has to do with the squad cost limit that La Liga enforces on their teams. Okay, and I didn't know if somehow I was wildly off base or if I'm not giving PSR rules nearly enough credit for how they are or are not impacting spending in England. I do think this squad cost limit is a real factor here. And before I get to that, I want to zoom out and say that this is absolutely not just a January 2025 spending thing. Clay is completely right, and I think the word several is used in the question. Over the last 2 seasons, according to Transfer Market, so you could even zoom out a little bit more here, La Liga has spent $1.7 billion, which puts them 5th in the world in that period of time on transfers. The Bundesliga is 4th on $2.2 billion. Liga is 3rd on 2.8. Serie A then at 3.2. And then the Premier League at an absolutely staggering $8.9 billion, which is like basically 5 times what La Liga is spending. But even Serie A is almost double of what La Liga has spent in the last several transfer windows. Cucho, I think Grammy mentioned him, he was the biggest deal of the entire January window in Spain. And again, you can zoom out and look bigger here. Last summer, La Liga spent basically a quarter of the Premier League. They spent 557 million euros. The Premier League spent 2.3 billion. This is a huge, monumental difference. And I love, Graham, that you got at the youth development kind of philosophy that a lot of these teams have. The Basque angle is great, and that's going to come up later on this show as a little spoiler there. And that does take clubs that could spend off the table and makes it more difficult to compete. And also, you don't always need to compete. If you have other good ways of doing business, that's great too. La Liga, though, are stricter with their rules. And Clay gets to this in the question. Clubs have to submit revenue and cost figures to the league. La Liga then sees if those are reasonable, essentially is the word that they use to describe it. They have their own team of people that reviews those figures, the estimations from teams to see if they make sense or not, if they're reasonable or not. And then La Liga gives them, each team, their own squad cost limit. So they're not all the same. They're different based on the teams, which is why Barcelona and Real Madrid can spend a ton of money. And we're not just talking about transfer fees here baked into the squad cost limit, although those are baked in on an amortized schedule, which is how teams typically pay those fees anyway. The squad cost limit includes player wages, coach wages as well, which I thought was interesting, agent fees, loan fees, tons of stuff is included in here. Basically, everything that you have to spend on your squad. So again, they're different for every team. That's why Barcelona and Real Madrid can be better. But this makes it harder for teams to go out there and just spend money wildly. I think the way that I saw several people describe these rules, especially in comparison to some things that UEFA and the Premier League have done, is that these are more proactive spending limits as opposed to reactive spending limits. You have to justify why you should be able to make a deal rather than figure it out later after you've already made the deal. So that is, I am quite sure, a very, very reduced version of this. And I don't have a perfect grasp of these rules, but it seems pretty safe to me to say that La Liga is absolutely stricter when it comes to only allowing reasonable spending than basically any other major league in the world.
Unless you're Barcelona.
Unless you're Barcelona, and that's a whole nother can of worms.
And just off the back of that point there, Joe, it's worthwhile touching on why these spending limits are in place, why they are so strict. So many Spanish clubs have mountains of debt at the moment. So I'm just looking through the balance sheets here of a few clubs. Barcelona have debt over 2 million euros. We've spoken about that at length in recent years. Real
Million
Madrid,
or billion?
Billion, sorry. Yeah, not million. They wish.
One of those seems worse than the other. Yeah.
Real Madrid's debt is around about 1 billion euros, although the way that it's structured is a little bit, they're not under as much pressure as Barcelona, and a lot of that is to do with the stadium construction as well. Atletico Madrid, their debt is over 500 million euros. Valencia's debt is 380 million euros. Sevilla's debt is over 100 million euros. Levante's debt is 50 million euros. So that is the reason this was brought in by Javier Tebas, who is the head of La Liga, of the league in Spain. It's because so many clubs in Spain faced going to the wall, and this is the response to that.
Yeah, and I think that's where I kind of focused my answer, is the financial side of things. a lot of it having to do with revenue in my mind. When you look at, say, the Premier League and their TV deal, it's when you kind of go domestic and international, I think they're pulling in £10 billion a year. La Liga earning roughly $2 billion per season by comparison. So you've got a sizable gap there. But then also with the Premier League, there is a more equitable distribution of that TV revenue, whereas in La Liga, it's a bit more top-heavy. I think half of it is equally distributed. 25% is based on performance. 25% is based on social impact, which is attendance and social media and all that good stuff. I think subscriptions and season tickets and all that. And that is where Barcelona and Real Madrid have a distinct advantage. And then they have a distinct advantage in the amount of money that they are then getting from that TV deal. So you have less money going to fewer clubs, basically, and you're not then maybe having the ability to spend the way you do in the Premier League. On top of that, looking specifically at the Premier League, you have larger stadiums and less travel, so I think you have more match day revenue as well. You have massive commercial revenue in the Premier League that is also kind of pumping up those numbers, and then you have that kind of competitive spending spirit that now persists in the Premier League, whereas I don't think it does as much or to the same degree in La Liga for myriad reasons that we've already covered. So I think the money coming in, the revenue coming in, is a huge part also of why maybe La Liga clubs aren't spending as much. Two other little things for me. One, just like a note that if we're talking about why there hasn't been as much transfer spend, Real Madrid's sort of policy change to we're going to just kind of talk to people behind closed doors and make them run down their contract and then sign them for free has worked very well for them and has maybe limited some of the spending that they have had to do. So that's one thing. The other would be, in my opinion, this is entirely just like speculation and maybe with a little bit of bias because I tend to watch more Premier League, obviously. I think if you are a club in La Liga and you know, like basically 2 or 3 teams are going to be vying for the title, that's kind of how it's going to be. I wonder if there is just maybe less desire to try to compete, less desire to try to get into those places or feel like you really can challenge for the title in any given season. Like the Premier League has the rotation of the big 4, 5, 6, whatever that challenge for the title and can theoretically win. And they have Leicester City, who won in 2015. Granted, that's now a decade ago, but that still serves as a sort of surprise and a reminder that anything can happen. Whereas in La Liga, I believe the last team to win that wasn't Barca, Real, or Atleti was Valencia in 2004. Yep. So we're coming up on 2 decades of a team that wasn't one of those 3 clubs winning the title in La Liga. And I do wonder if that dampens some of the competitive spend as a result.
I wonder if, anecdotally speaking as well, we could probably talk about the ownership and foreign ownership of clubs in La Liga as well. I mean, look at Serie A being the second biggest spender. 9 of the ownership groups are American now, for example. They're using these clubs as investment vehicles. They're putting a lot of money into them at the moment. Liga, one of the biggest spenders, has got at least one big club that spends a lot of money. So when the Liga doesn't spend as much, you maybe look at the way those clubs are also being invested in and treated as entities in themselves as well. So that's definitely a consideration.
I think so, Ryan. And I think when you're the Premier League and you open yourself up to global commercialization, I think it's a point that you've kind of made before, Ryan. Like you kind of take away maybe some of the soul of that club, given the way you're committing your obligations, where you're doing preseason, who your owner might be. And I think it's sort of once you open that door, you never really know what's going to come in. Whereas La Liga, I think, has been slower in their commercialization, slower in their global revenue. And in some ways that puts them behind and is maybe a thing they're trying to rectify. But I think it also maybe preserves some of the tradition, some of the identity of these clubs. And so you do have, I think, more clubs that are more of an institution in La Liga that are never going to be sold, that are never going to be taken over by a sovereign wealth fund or something like that. And I think it wasn't Mallorca. Who was it who was taken over?
Danielson.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Mallorca do have, so Stuart Holden is part of the Mallorca ownership group.
Yeah, it's a different M from like 20 years ago.
Malaga.
Thank you. Like they were reviled when they were taken over and were going to be the next Manchester City. And I just think about how unpopular they were compared to how that's basically just the norm in the Premier League at this point. That I think that also shows you a bit of the different identities of the leagues.
Yeah, Valladolid are currently going through that with Ronaldo Nazario, who's their owner, and they are not happy about that. There's a different culture in Spain with Barcelona have the socios structure of their club, and it's closer to Germany actually, Spanish football in that sense than it is the Premier League.
Yeah. All right. By the way, Danielson, Graham was quite right. Was the world transfer record when he went to Betis in the 90s. Who can tell me which MLS team he played for? Who's got it?
FC Dallas.
Oh, wow.
FC Dallas, indeed.
Nice, Taylor.
Good
8
pull.
games. Did you watch them all, Taylor?
I believe I had a like VHS highlight tape from the
Nice.
season where he played. That was all the goals from the league. So I watched him score. If he scored, I'm not sure he did. I just remember him being a talking point of he went from, I believe, winning the World Cup to playing for FC Dallas at a time when maybe they weren't the best team to play for.
There you go. Talk about the rise and fall. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're staying in Spain. We're going to the Basque Country. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Mustard Overlord, love that handle, has been in touch via Discord and says, why have teams and managers from the Basque Country been so unbelievably successful relative to their population? This success includes 2 teams that are a threat to finish in the top 4 in any given season, one of which only signs Basque players, and the other of which is from a city roughly the population of Sunderland. The other thing, arguably 4 of the top 10 managers in the world right now, Arteta, Emery, Xabi Alonso, and Andoni Iraola, all of whom are not only from the Basque region, but specifically the province of Gipuzkoa? Yep. Population 750,000. Are they doing something special, or is it just serendipity? Taylor, of course, the teams we're talking about here are Athletic Bilbao and Real Sociedad, both of whom very impressive in the way they go about things, and Athletic Club with the Cantera policy, which means they only sign Basque players. They've never been relegated from the top flight in nearly 100 years of play. So yeah, it is something in the water, right? It must be.
TL didn't listen. Basque Country good? Yeah,
Yes.
That's about where we are.
Yep.
All right.
got
I've
Nielsen.
never been to Nielsen. I have never been to the Basque Country. I have never wanted to go more than I do right now, having researched this question, because it just seems like an incredible place to go, not just for the football, for many different reasons, but for the football, for the purposes of this question. Let's start with that reliance on academies, Bilbao and their Lezama Academy in particular, Lezama. They ID talent at a very young age, and then they're putting them into intensive, high-quality training. And I think, I've mentioned this before, but I remember at one of the coaching conventions, United Soccer coaching conventions, there was a Basque coach there trying to run a drill with Philly Academy players, and he just got getting so frustrated by how they couldn't execute certain technical things that he fully expected, I think, 17-year-olds to be able to do. And that always stood out to me as like, you have very high standards for what you think young players should be able to do. And I think that means you basically have younger players playing at a higher level more frequently. But I also think that means that you don't have as much kind of like falling by the wayside as you do maybe in other leagues and in other countries where there's so much competition for academy. I think at like youth level, you're trying to pull in as many players as you can if you're in, say, England. And then as you go, you're sort of cutting a bunch. Maybe they pop up at other academies elsewhere, but you're trying to kind of winnow it down to this kind of select group that can potentially make their way through. Whereas I feel like in the Basque region, where you have that smaller population, but a dedication to focusing on that smaller population, I think you're going to stick with players longer. You're going to stick with kids longer. And maybe in other leagues, you might kind of jettison somebody because they're too short or too skinny or whatever it might be. And I think there is more focus on sticking with those players for a longer period of time as they are young. I think a lot of that is also because there is such a cultural connection to football in the Basque region. It has massive importance, which means it has a massive rate of participation. I think it has one of the highest football participation rates in Europe, the Basque Country. And that means more fields, more facilities, more training opportunities. If you're playing at a higher level, if you're training at a higher level, it usually means there's going to be more opportunities for coaching and coaching courses. And so then I think you get better talent identification, better coaching, better youth development, better youth coaching, and it all kind of goes hand in hand.
Yes, indeed.
I remember, I remember Andoni Iraola being on Monday Night Football, and this was at the time where this was a talking point, where you've got Arteta, Emery, Xabi Alonso, Iraola, there's a couple others as well, who are all from the Basque Country, and they asked him, what is it? Why is there so many managers coming out of this region of Spain? Opportunity is what he said, where these clubs, and you know, they don't always have Basque managers, these clubs. At the moment, Imanol is from the Basque Country. He's the La Real head coach. Athletic Club have Ernesto Valverde, who's not Basque, and of course they had Marcelo Bielsa in the past, so they don't always have a Basque manager, but nonetheless, in terms of coaching, they will naturally promote Basque coaches at a quicker rate. They'll fast track those coaches, and so yeah, I think there's just there's a culture within that region. And you look at they've also got kind kind of icons that they can look to, like Juan Malilo, who is Pep Guardiola's assistant coach right now and is this sort of iconic, legendary figure in Spanish coaching. Chiqui Begiristain, I think, is also from the Basque country and is involved or was involved in coaching. So there's always been people for them to look up to. And I think for players and coaches, if you can see what you want to be, it is, there is that pathway into the first team and into the manager's job.
Well, I was lucky enough many years ago to go to Bilbao to make a TV show for the Travel Channel. We did it all about the club, actually. Went to Lezama, went to it was the old San Mamés Stadium. It was when they were building the new one, so half of it was built.
Yeah,
and then they knocked down the old San Mamés to build the other half, kind of like what they did at Tottenham. But Taylor, you mentioned you haven't been to the Basque Country. Thoroughly recommend it. I've been a few times, including that trip. It is awesome. Guggenheim Museum has a flower puppy statue, which you may have seen in one of the James Bond movies with Pierce Brosnan in it.
Is there an aquarium?
Didn't go to the aquarium. There must be. Must be. And it must be better than all the other aquariums, Graham, because all those Basque local fish that they only get from the Basque region. That's probably how they do it there.
With names that you can't pronounce.
Yeah, indeed. But I think one of the most impressive things, certainly about Bilbao, is how it's got that. Newcastle has it to a certain extent, that one-team town. Everything is all about Bilbao. You won't see Real Madrid or Barcelona shirts on the streets or in the stores. They're very fiercely loyal, and I think that maybe lends itself to the opportunity that the funneling of everything, Joe, into that club. And Sociedad, similar story.
Yeah, I think that's all totally fair, and I agree with everything that's been said so far. Taylor, you talked about participation. Sid Lowe for ESPN had a really good piece about specifically why are there so many coaches, and Graham got to this some with the Areola on Monday Night Football, why are there so many coaches coaching at incredibly high levels that have become some of the most prominent figures in the game that have all come from basically the same place. And one of the points that Lowe made in this piece is that Gipuzkoa has more registered footballers, both boys and girls, than any other Spanish province on a per capita basis, which I know, Taylor, you kind of got to some of that participation as well. But just to lay it out very clearly, with that focus on youth soccer comes the need to produce and value, from a cultural perspective, coaches, and a lot of coaches, to teach those players how to play the game. Diaz, Sidlow talked with a guy named Manu Diaz for this piece, who is the head of the Football Federation in Gipuzkoa, which I think if I'm remembering
He's just
correctly,
rubbing it in at this point, right?
No, dude,
It's weird, right? Either.
It's weird how when Joe pronounced it, it didn't have a question mark at the end. I guess that maybe is just like a spelling.
That's the difference.
or
It's the
something.
conviction.
You know, Taylor was coming for Ryan's job. Maybe someone else is coming for Ryan's job. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. I believe Spanish soccer is divided into they have these federation presidents or leaders in different areas all across Spain, if memory serves. So Manu Diaz is the head of the federation there, and he had this quote that said, "The role of coaches is valued highly, and the structures in place in Basque football prepare players to stay in the game. Clubs here turn to homegrown coaches," which I think is a real factor here for why so many coaches come out of Basque areas, right? Where, okay, not all of them are going to make it to the top, but if you're producing an incredible volume, you're going to have a lot of them trickle to the top. If you're emphasizing youth development, you're going to send a lot of players to play for other very good coaches where they're going to learn stuff, and that's going to influence them. And I think that's another piece of the puzzle here. A lot of the coaches that we're talking about have, like Lopetegui and Alonso and Arteta and Emery, have worked with other legendary, influential coaches. Lopetegui was a part of Cruyff's Barcelona squad that churned out coaches left and right. Xabi Alonso worked with Pep, Mourinho, and Ancelotti over his career. Arteta went to La Masia, which is a pretty good place to get your education in this sport, and then went to coach with Guardiola. Unai Emery worked with Bielsa. Graham mentioned Bielsa earlier. Those are huge factors here as well. It's not just the romantic, for good reason, side of, wow, we're in this small area and everybody cares about a lot of the same things and has similar values, and that helps. Those things do help. Like, culture absolutely matters here, but I think being exposed to some of the greatest thinkers that this game has seen also matters a lot. So there's a lot of factors here. I think the TLDR or TLDL, I guess, to go back to what Taylor said earlier, is that Spain in general is a hotbed for producing talent, and culturally I think is a really good fit for developing homegrown coaches and homegrown players. And the Basque Country really kind of takes that to another level with their values, both from a professional soccer standpoint and how those clubs are structured, and then in terms of how that stuff trickles down all the way to the grassroots stuff.
Yeah, definitely. One factor we haven't mentioned, the national drink of the Basque Country is called the calimocho. Has anyone ever had a calimocho before? I'm going to take that as a no. Taylor would. I might have discussed this on the feed before. Do you know what Calamocho is? I've got genuine theory behind why it's fueling soccer success. It is 1 part red wine, 1 part full fat Coke. That is the drink they all drink there.
Dude,
Calamocho.
I have heard of this drink multiple times, and it is supposedly really, really good. I still have a hard time believing it. I enjoy that in Parks and Rec. I believe like the beverage of the cult that exists in Pawnee is like the sacred nectar of the gods, and it's Dr. Pepper and red wine. So I feel like they went a similar route, but maybe had a more regal title to it.
So what you're saying, Ryan, is that like Jamie Vardy, he downs a can of Red Bull before he takes the pitch. Nico Williams and Iñaki Williams, they're down in a Calamocho before they take to the pitch at St. Mammies.
Yeah, and just like, imagine you have a couple of those. Imagine the sugar you've had. You've got energy for days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is explaining a lot.
Ryan, on that note, sorry, Taylor, you said full fat Coke? What?
Yeah,
Coke
that's a British
does
thing.
Coke
It
have
doesn't
fat?
make any
Coke
sense.
doesn't have fat in it. does it?
Ryan, pull back.
You're drinking it wrong, Joe. You're drinking it wrong. That's all I can
Am I
say.
supposed to be adding heavy cream to my Coca-Cola? What is happening right now?
Joe, you have a very valid point. It's a thing people say over here. It makes no sense. Full sugar would be a more appropriate term.
So
it
like
just means
diet versus regular.
Cola.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So if I was in a British restaurant and I said Coke, they'd say...
Tighten up, Bailey. This is not good.
No, you'd often get, Graham, do you want diet or full fat, right? That's what they would say.
It's a common thing to say.
It's absurd.
There we go. All right. And
Unreal.
in the Basque country, it's just full fat. That's how they roll.
I like how it really is reflective. Like, so Vardy has the port, then we've got red wine and cola. We've got mate for South America, and then America, I think, is just Red Bull. It's just Red Bull before games is what I think everybody goes for. And then if you're Antonio Conte, it's water and nothing else while he makes direct eye contact with you the whole time.
Ultra and shouting. That's what he has. Yes, definitely. Mustard Overlord, thank you very much for your question and the discussion that it inspired. Aurora Rodriguez, some great handles today, has come in with asking about the Luka transfer to the LA Lakers and the eruption that it has caused.
The Lakers
I cannot
got
imagine
Modric?
this. Sorry?
The Lakers got Modric?
Yeah, you didn't hear it? Ballon d'Or, man.
I'm as confused as you about this
Ballon
question,
d'Or.
Taylor, but I'll get it all
Oh,
out.
yeah, you weren't here for the Patreon episode that evolves into like 30 minutes of NBA chat. I forgot about that.
So, yeah, here we go. With the Luka Dončić transfer to the Lakers and the eruption that it caused, I can't imagine this happening to a club in Europe. Has there ever been a transfer as irrational as this one? What do you think the soccer equivalent is to this transfer, and how do you think fans would react? Taylor, as you noted, this was discussed on Patreon during my sojourn absence last week. What's all this about this basketball transfer thing?
So basically, the Mavericks traded Luka Dončić, who is very good and young, to the Lakers for Anthony Davis, and somehow the Jazz were involved, as Joe mentioned, who was good, is still okay, but is aging. And it was sort of a seismic shift. Dončić, for his part, was not aware that this was happening. I think had just bought a $15 million house in Dallas, was not too thrilled about it. And it is seen as pretty indefensible because, like, even if you are the Mavs and you don't want to re-sign him, there are plenty of other teams who would have given you much, much more than the Lakers gave you. So it's led to theories that there was collusion, or the league wants the Lakers to be very good, or there are other factors at play. I think it's just Dallas being cheap and not having good people in charge. But that is sort of the background of this one. And I think important to pause there to note, as Joe so often points out, it is tough to draw a comparison between this and the world of football because, aside from MLS, basically, everywhere else, if there is a transfer, the player has to agree to that transfer. With American franchises and American sports, the player doesn't. Their contract moves, they move with that contract, and then you renegotiate from there. So it's tougher to find direct comparisons, but I have 3 for you. I will start with 2 that required a bit of research from me and I was less familiar with. They are from the 90s. Francesco Coco. Yes, of course. Him first, always. But then these are two of these 3 are basically straight up swap deals. It's Francesco Coco moving from AC Milan to Inter, with Clarence Seedorf going the other way. Seedorf wins Serie A twice, the UEFA Champions League twice, amongst other things. Coco is meant to be a replacement for Maldini when he was at Milan. He doesn't really reach that hype. Goes to Inter, has a bad back, has surgery. He says he didn't want it. He says Inter made him get it, but then he's out for 2 years. He never really plays that much again and bounces around Europe from there. So you basically have one club getting in an asset that doesn't end up doing anything. You have the other getting in a legendary player. I think that would be somewhat of a comparison. Probably the best one in terms of like-for-like here would be legendary defender for a reserve goalkeeper, which would be Fabio Cannavaro moving to Juventus from Inter, with Fabian Carini going the other way. He was the starter for Uruguay. He was the third or fourth choice goalkeeper at Juve. And when he went to Inter, he was the second or third choice goalkeeper at Inter. He plays 4 games in 3 years. He goes out on loan for one of those years where he only plays 8 appearances for Cagliari. So he is never really near that level, whereas Juve got themselves one of the best defenders, certainly one of the best Italian defenders in my memory. That does kind of coincide with Calciopoli, so that's maybe less remembered these days. And then the one when we were first discussing this move, I apologize for going long, but when we were first discussing the Dončić trade, the one that came to mind was the Bebe transfer to Manchester United. I mentioned it earlier, because at the time it was just such a, what is happening, and who is this guy, and why are they spending so much money? At the time, it's only £7.4 million, which is a good chunk of money. It's minimal by today's standards. But the difference here would be that Bebe had been out of contract. He signed for Vitória de Guimarães that same summer, basically, on a free transfer. He had a release clause of €3 million. That was then increased to €9 million because of preseason friendlies. And then Manchester United paid that release clause to bring him to Manchester that same summer. And there are agent connections. It gets investigated for corruption and fraud, I believe. I don't know if anything ever comes of it. I think he also has George Mendes as an agent, and there's some speculation that Mendes gets a huge chunk of that transfer fee himself, and it's a way to kind of keep George Mendes happy and keep him funneling players to Manchester United. But that, I remember just being a fully indefensible, everyone was confused, why is this move happening? And because it's Sir Alex Ferguson, recommended by Carlos Queiroz, is how that player ended up coming on the radar, I think. There's an idea that, like, oh, he must know something, he must have seen something, there must be some level of analysis here, and I don't think that was ever really the case. I think it gets a little bit less scrutiny because it's Manchester United at the time and Sir Alex Ferguson, but that was one that I think no one really understood, and to this day, I think is a fairly questionable, sort of hazy one.
Yeah, I like all those shouts, Taylor. I want to go to two points before I offer up some of my picks here. The first is I really want to just emphasize even more strongly how absurd this trade was. This pretty much broke the internet. This broke the city of Dallas, where I talked about this on the Patreon. There are videos of people at parties just having a good time, and then all of a sudden somebody looks at their phone and sees the notification, and they're legitimate screams that travel around these parties. And I think there were DJs announcing it at nightclubs when this happened because everyone was shocked. This is the wildest trade that we have seen probably in sports, because it is, I guess, a more American sports thing. So I can say in sports, in decades, like a really, really long time. Luka Dončić is probably one of the 4 or 5 best players in the NBA, and was generally regarded, at least by me, I'm not an NBA expert here, but I know a little bit, as like kind of untradeable, and one of a few guys who kind of fit that description because they are title caliber top tier stars. It is so hard to win in the NBA if you don't have someone in that absolute top echelon of players, and Dončić is one of those guys. In Dallas, it is mind-boggling to me that they weren't willing to keep him around and build a team around him. He is not a perfect player. He is probably not the absolute best player in the NBA, and he has some problems, but he is unbelievably good and is absolutely like an S-tier kind of star for one of these teams. So that's the first reason why it's hard to come up with a comparison, because those kinds of players don't really tend to move like this in soccer. And Taylor, you got to that already in a way with the transfer side of thing, where those deals are just structured differently, and players have more power in soccer outside of MLS than they do in other American sports. That's one thing. The other thing here is I think it is impossible to construct a move in soccer that would have this much of an impact on the two teams involved, because an individual soccer player does so much less to contribute to winning than an individual basketball player. Given that basketball players are 5 on the court at a time, soccer players, you've got 11, and the structure of the game is so different. You can make a shot so quickly in basketball. You cannot score a goal very quickly in soccer. Ergo, your ability to impact the game.
Disagree.
That's true. That's true, man. They kept that up for so. Oh wait, no, they didn't. I don't know. This is really, really hard to do. Liam Twomey for The Athletic had some good shouts here. Apologies if I mispronounced the last name. It's not a Spanish province, so I got nothing for you. For shock factor, I think he had Luis Figo moving from Barcelona to Real Madrid as an option here. It's a very different sort of move, but I like that shout. A commenter on that piece, this is fictional, but hypothesized Real Madrid, like back in Ronaldo's peak, Real Madrid trading Ronaldo for Barcelona's Pedro, which I thought was a great example here. Both players that are very well known, playing for teams that have a lot of notoriety. I mean, a little different in NBA terms in this case, but like Ronaldo is Luka Dončić getting traded in return for Pedro. Like, oh, that guy's kind of good. Like, we got that guy. Oh, we gave up Ronaldo to get him. That makes no sense. And I think the one that we talked about maybe on the Patreon a little bit was Mbappe today being traded for Casemiro. Like, all of these fall flat, but Mbappe is probably one of the 4 or 5 best players in the world. I think we would all mostly get on board with that claim. Casemiro was really good and can still add a little bit of value, but Mbappe is so much more influential. Like, that trade makes no sense if it were to ever happen, and the Luka Dončić trade still makes no sense, and there's no explanation for it.
Yeah, it was the Figo one that I was thinking of when we were describing all this, and Taylor, we had some good ones, which all sound super above board and legit, the ones that Taylor mentioned, by the way, those trades that deals you mentioned. Graham, anything else to add here?
Not really. I really struggled with this because, to Joe's point and what's already been said, there isn't really a comparison in terms of how wild this is. And I like Taylor's digging on the sort of trades that have happened because, obviously, I mean, Todd Boehly has tried his best over the last few years, but trades aren't really a thing in soccer. So there's not much of a comparison. I very much enjoyed you, Taylor, saying that the Jazz was involved. And if you didn't know the Utah Jazz as a team, you would think that, like, the Dallas Mavs GM just got really high on Bleeding Gums Murphy tapes one night and was just like, yeah, we'll just trade.
Things
the
can
Jazz
be two things,
the Jazz
Graham.
was involved.
Things can be two things.
Maybe that's the explanation.
While we're going back to that move, Joe, after you talked about like the footage of some of the nightclubs, I went and watched it, and what it reminded me of, because it is funny if you then remember that this is like human misery, but it reminded me of The Sopranos in season 1 when the acting boss passes away and the guys find out where they're at, the bada bing, and everything kind of goes silent and everyone's really sad. And then it cuts to one of the dancers who is not wearing any clothes but is crying, and she says, "I will never forget where I was on this day," like in relation to a mobster dying. It felt similar, like the Dallas nightclub just shutting down and everyone just being forlorn about an NBA trade. It is simultaneously why sports are the worst and the best, that they can have that impact on an entire city, but at the same time, that they can have that impact on an entire city is why we love sports.
Yeah. Do you think they dropped a beat on it as they were going, Dončić is gone, Dončić is gone, in the club?
No, unfortunately, it was that, Graham. They did have the soundbite, but it was the Price is Right sound when you lose, so it was just Dončić is gone. Wah, 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 wah. That was it. Over and over and over again.
I'm picturing some patrons in the VIP being so disgusted with this news that, you know, the champagne that's coming with sparklers coming out of it. No thanks, take it back. I don't want bottle service anymore. I'm disgusted.
Not in the mood. Yeah, we've also buried the lead on all this as a Phoenix Suns fan, and I know that's the prevailing NBA team that we all support amongst the 4 of us, in that I'm the only one who supports an NBA team, so you all have to get on board. This is a great trade for the Phoenix Suns because I have been sort of preying on the Mavericks' downfall, and the Lakers are still not a very good team, and it was a good Saturday evening for me. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
All right. Bottle service for Joe then on that when he was in the
I'm in the mood. Let's go.
Yeah, excellent. Aurora Rodriguez, thank you very much for your question. We take a quick break and a couple more questions coming after this. Stick around. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our list of questions. Oh, look who's written in. It's Texas Husia on the Discord. Thank you very much, Texas Husia.
Worse this time? All right.
Oh, I love it so much. You had to do it more and more British each time, Ryan. It's so fun. Anyway.
Texas Husia says, what would you rather have? An uber-talented team who's not tactically sound? I'm talking about world-quality players at every position who are just out there kicking the ball around a bit, Harry Redknapp style. Or an incredibly drilled coach team with great tactics that's of league average quality. Graham, someone else in our Discord server basically said, so do you want Real Madrid or Bournemouth? Which
Yep.
Well, sort of. Like, yeah. I think this is... there might be a bit of dissent between us here, which I'm looking forward to.
And listeners will never guess where the dissent is going to come from. It's not obvious at all if you've ever listened to this show.
I think this is pretty clear-cut because, to your point, Ryan, Real Madrid, like, I'd always choose talent because from there you can basically achieve anything. You can maybe add on top of that, whereas if you don't have the talent, there's a ceiling on what you can achieve.
That's why those Galacticos teams always won and never imploded.
they did win a Champions League, and I'd never seen
PSG were
Bournemouth
great
winning a
when
Champions
like
League.
Neymar and Messi, right?
Yet. I have a question before we further dive into this.
This is going to be so good.
This might just be like a Taylor peculiarity. How did you all interpret the like would you rather have? As in, is that like a team you're playing on? Is that a team that you are watching? Is that a team that you are supporting? Like
I think,
is that a team that you want to win? Like I wanted to drill down on that scenario for a moment.
I interpreted this as which team do I think would be better? Because I like to win and I think winning is fun. If I'm interpreting it as which do I want to play on, I am absolutely Team Taylor on this question, which is like I'm Team well-drilled because I feel like it's more fun when everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction and kind of playing from the same score rather than when everybody is trying to do different things. I think that is often a more fun environment to play in. But if I am trying to pick which team I think is better and which one's going to make me have more fun as some sort of a stakeholder, I'm going Graham's.
Is that more fun to play on? Like today's task, 3 hours of video analysis, then set piece drills, rather than just go out and have fun, boys. And
Joe wants Daddy to tell him what to do. That's all.
Sure, okay.
Word for word. That's just a direct quote from the pre-show. Really.
Like genuinely, I think if you have these two teams, if you went with this kind of like broadly speaking, I think the uber talented team wins the first 3, maybe the first 4, and then I think the drilled team starts to figure them out, starts to pose problems. And I have seen enough uber talented teams that should be winning, that isn't winning, implode spectacularly and just succumb to infighting and screaming at each other and demanding a ball, and everybody wants to be the one who's scoring the goal and righting the ship. And I can see how that would implode or explode spectacularly. So I think if it's for like which would be more entertaining, which would be more fun to watch week in, week out, it is undeniably the uber talented team because they're going to be great to watch when they win and maybe equally great to watch when they don't win, and you get to see them all just kind of hate each other. But I also feel like we have another test case in PSG when you have 3 of the best players in the world, at least at the time,
and they win the league title every single season.
Case? But also don't really play it as a unit. And as soon as they play somebody who like has a system in place, they
still
maybe
win the
run
title.
into some problems. I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it can be a trickier obstacle because I also think that is. Again, I'm maybe looking at PSG in a Champions League light versus in Ligue 1. I think if you have a team that is really disciplined and hard pressing and hard running, if you play them versus PSG every single week, I think that's where it balances out. When you have teams that aren't really competing against PSG and aren't really capable of doing so and are maybe throwing in the towel, you're going to have a points difference right from the jump. But I think there are certain teams in Ligue 1 that consistently posed a problem for PSG, and I think there are teams in the world that could consistently pose a problem for an uber talented team that maybe isn't going to play together when push comes to shove.
Oh yeah, I see where you're coming from, and maybe the calculus.
Good, I'm
does
right.
change
Okay,
a
we
little
can
bit
end
here.
it there. Cool, Ryan. Next question. No,
maybe the calculus does change if you do like a best of 25 series between these same 2 teams over and over again. I really don't think it does. I think we have so much evidence that when one uber talented team loses a title, another uber talented team wins the title. Even when PSG loses the title, Lille win the title. Oh, and they spend a lot on their squad relative to the other teams in Liga and have a ton of very, very good players. Like, if we're talking about which team would be more successful, I truly don't think there is a competitive context in which the answer is not, at the highest levels, the answer is not, the team with a really, really absurd talent is going to win almost every single time. Now, soccer is a high variance sport, and that's why we see weird upsets at times. But if you play enough games, like a World Cup, any playoff sort of situation is ripe for upsets. That's absolutely true. We see that all the time. I understand that. But if you make the sample size a league season, which is kind of what I was thinking about for this, but I mean, totally fair to interpret it different ways too, then even when one good team doesn't win it, the other good team almost always wins. Like there's a reason Leicester was 5,000 to 1, I guess is sort of my argument here.
Well, could we say England at the Euros being probably the most talented squad, but having no tactics, basically, is a case in point for that, arguably?
No attacking tactics, maybe, yeah. That's fair. Talent does go a really, really, really long way.
Yeah. My favourite YouTuber, Matt Armstrong, says hard work beats talent. That is his catchphrase. So I'm inclined to... I see both sides of the fence here, because where Graham is saying, if I was a neutral, I would want to see the uber-talented team. I think that would be what I'd rather have. But as a fan, I think I'd rather support the tactical team.
that your point,
I'm
Graham?
hardwired to go...
That was my next question. That was my question for Joe, actually. Joe, would you rather, like the Phoenix Rising, would you rather they had a uber talented team where it's bangers in from 25 yards, but it's all very vibesy, or would you rather have some, talk about their box midfield or their organisation at the back? Because that kind of feels like your sort of thing. Like, what would you rather as a fan?
Well, when you started with, I don't want to be on a team with 3 hours of video analysis, I was like, hold on, man, I'm not so ready to say that. So I see where you're coming from. I would pick the first thing because I truly believe that the first thing, all the stars kicking the ball around, is going to make the team better. And I would be most happy if my team was the best team of all the teams in the land. I like winning stuff.
Watching film is fun. I'm just going to add
Watching film is fun. I completely agree.
If your choice is like 2-a-days and doing a ton of intense running, or sitting in an air-conditioned room and watching tape, watching tape is more fun.
Yeah.
I'll accept it if on a Friday we can put a movie on. If we get to watch Mrs. Doubtfire on a Friday.
Oh, that would be good.
Yeah.
Good Scottish accent. Fun.
Mrs. Doubtfire. That's what. Okay, all right. That's what we're going.
Well,
for. Pierce Brosnan is getting a run out on this episode.
Just substitute teacher vibes. I don't know why, but Mrs. Doubtfire was always put on in our school when there was a substitute teacher, which actually was, is kind of borderline for a school environment. Is a bit borderline, but
maybe.
Yeah, it was always on.
We got Mr. Nanny. We went to a worse school than you, obviously.
Listeners, I just want you to know that when we were in break, Ryan said we should probably move
keep
quickly
these tight.
Yeah, we got to keep it tight. Now here we are. Talking about Mrs. Doubtfire and whatever other movies.
All right. If you haven't seen Mr. Nanny with Hulk Hogan, by the way,
don't.
Keep it that way, yeah. Texas from CA, thank you very much indeed for that question. One final one. We've got a couple minutes to squeeze in for this one from GB Heron. GB Heron, once again, the handles on this episode, fantastic. Thank you for everybody for writing in. GB Heron sounds like they're like the author of a dusty old book on fly fishing that you'd find in the library. I like that very much indeed. GB Heron says
they're a racist Commonwealth attorney. I hate to break it to you. In Alabama in the 70s, GB Heron. I'm preempting the question, which makes fun of us.
Oh dear!
Wow, there it is. Wow,
makes fun of you maybe.
Doing their suspenders and.
I may not be a hotshot city lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. We've gone off the rails. Do managers have dress codes? Asked GB Heron. It seems most wear dark colours, black, blue, or grey. If not, which managers are the most colourful dressers? Oh, here we go. There's a shot fired here. I was going to ask about the most stylish dressers, but after watching you guys on YouTube, I think I'll go elsewhere to ask about stylish dressers. Now. Thanks.
Your name is letters.
Heron.
Your name is letters. That's what I have to say to you. Technically, all of our names are letters, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Got more.
I mean, don't blame me for my dress sense. Blame Ryan today.
That's true. Yeah. We appreciate the shots fired there. I suppose if I was going to sincerely answer Southern lawyer GB Heron's answer, it would be Julian Nagelsmann. Is he the most colourful dresser?
The most colourful dressed? Yeah, I think so.
He's got to be right.
I think so. He's toned it down a little bit since he's gone to. I don't know whether Adidas have had a word or someone at the German FA's had a word, but he wasn't quite so outlandish at the Euros last year. I'm never a fan of the older manager in full tracksuit, if you know what I mean. So like Manuel Pellegrini is 71 years old, and he'll be in like a bright green Kappa tracksuit. Which, by the way, the bright green Kappa tracksuit, the vibes are absolutely immaculate there, but. On a pensioner? I don't know. I'm never a great fan. Moyes is a culprit of that as well, like full tracksuit in his like late 60s. I'm never a fan.
Okay. What about Pep wearing sort of jeans and wool products? How do we feel about that?
Pep used to be the best dressed manager when he was at Barcelona and Bayern, and then I don't know what happened at Man City with the knitwear. I'm not a fan of the knitwear. It's too much knitwear. It's too big. It's too engulfsome. So I don't know what's happening there.
Any other nominations for colourfully dressed managers, or Taylor and Joe, are you too hurt by GB Heron's comments about our lack of sartorial prowess?
No, heard and warranted on my end. First of all, I'm not going to even do anything but lean into that. My pick, I had Nagelsmann on my list. My pick is Casey Stoney, former Manchester United manager, Diego Wave manager, and now Canada's manager on the women's side of the game. She has the pink jacket that she wears a lot. I believe it was even used in the announcement photo that Canada Soccer had taken or that they had taken from somewhere else on the internet. To be clear, this is Canada Soccer and their budget that we're talking about here. I don't think they staged a whole separate photo shoot. It was used in the announcement post of Casey Stoney becoming Canada's new manager. It is iconic, and I remember having Adam Snavely on the show years ago now. some sort of listener questions episode or New Year's resolution episode, and he brought up Casey Stoney's fashion, and that has been just something that I haven't been able to unthink whenever we talk about managers and their attire on the sidelines. Casey Stoney sets the standard in a lot of ways. Shout out Casey Stoney.
Yeah, fair enough.
I go a different direction. I cannot find a picture of him, so now I'm wondering if I have melded two managers together. But I swear Ricardo Lavolpe, the former Mexico manager, at one point rocked jeans, dress shirt, bolo tie, blazer while smoking cigarettes on the sidelines. And that is a look right there. I do think Pep for the longest time was sort of the model of style and would always be wearing different little things. Like I remember when he was rocking the shoes that looked like Adidas but had 5 stripes or 4 stripes, and then you look it up. I think they had 4 stripes, and you look it up, and they were $500 instead of what they look like, which were Sambas, which should only be like $100. So he would always add little wrinkles and stuff, but I think as his teams have struggled, maybe he's focused less on his fashion of late. Regardless, even if it's a tracksuit, I will still take, generally speaking, broadly speaking, soccer managers over any NFL coach, because the NFL mandates that you wear league apparel and team apparel. I remember, I think it was the Niners coach who wanted to wear a suit to kind of harken back to the old days, and I think he took a fine for it every single game for wearing a suit, and then he got fired in the end anyway because maybe he wasn't a good Niners coach. But yeah, when you have Bill Belichick like cutting the sleeves off of his hoodie sweatshirt, I'm not sure that's a look that really screams fashion, even if it's one that Ryan rocks regularly when we record.
I'm a tough gym guy. Yeah.
Taylor, what do you think of Almiron's dress sense? Because I really like it. I like how he wears a pair of khakis, not in a Ted Lasso sort of way, but he wears them well, and he's got the sort of Andrew Wiebe no socks thing going on. I mean, it can't be long.
Socks are in though. That's the problem.
Oh.
That is true. It can't be long until Ratcliffe auctions off his clothes on Vinted or eBay. He'll be wearing a bin bag before too long. But for the time being, I think Almiron is up there as one of the best dressed. He's my man crush at the moment.
He just makes him wear Eric Ten Hag's hand-me-downs. Like, we can't afford new clothes. Here's a trash bag full of what Eric Ten Hag was wearing. You have to wear it. To be honest, I focus less on Ruben Amorim's fashion sense and more on his increasingly forlorn face and just how tired he looks at all times.
There we go. Wonderful. We've buried the lead, by the way. Just during this conversation, I've recalled pictures of Brian Robson, Manchester United legend, when he first signed as
I know where you're
manager.
going with this.
I'm holding it up to the camera if you're watching
so
on
bad.
YouTube. He did the half and half.
Yeah.
The top half of his body is a suit, a jacket, a shirt, and a tie. The bottom half is shorts and soccer socks, and he's doing sort of keep-ups on the field. So he is literally like a centaur of soccer. He's half and half.
So did you say this, Ryan? This is when he was player manager, right? That's what that's meant to signify. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's half and half. Ridiculous.
Exactly.
Oh, centaur of soccer is so good. Wow.
There was a moment
There we go.
in time when, like, 10-year-old me was watching a Charlie Sheen movie on television because parenting was solid
Hot
in
Shots
the
Part
90s. No, it was the one where he's, like, driving and is being chased by the police for the entire movie, but I remember him wearing a button-up shirt and sweatpants, and even 10-year-old me was like, you're not allowed to do that. That's not an okay look. Soccer shorts and soccer socks with a button-up and a blazer, I'm kind of more into. Let's make that happen. That's Graham's official dress code for any live shows from now on. We all agree?
doing
Let's
right
put
now.
it to a vote.
Yeah.
I
Agreed.
I mean,
We'll do-
anytime
the ayes
I
have
put
it.
on a shirt
Graham
on
said
one
aye.
of these, when we did Bleach Report live streams or whatever, that is essentially what was happening, quite frankly. Was a dress shirt with just pants and my underwear.
All right. We have gone long enough on
Wedding
this
attire.
episode. Let's end it there. GB Heron, thank you very much indeed. I do declare that your question was wonderful, as were all the others on this episode. If you want to submit one, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, where you can access our Discord. You can also access, or send us a question if you go to totalsoccershow.com/questions. Thank you very much indeed. Taylor Walkwell, thank you very much indeed for your answering of said questions.
Thank you very much, Ryan Bailey. Thank you very much to GB Heron, who took time away from prosecuting jaywalking as felonies to write in that question. I really appreciate it.
Joe Larry, pleasure as always, my good sir.
I aspire to have this level of beef with someone in my life. Taylor, this is exemplary work.
Very good indeed. And Graham Rusden, let's keep up this AFC Wimbledon fandom that you have. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
I mean, you're going to have to buy me some stuff, like I bought you a Sterling Albion shirt, right? That must be in the mail at some point, I presume, and I'll wear that on a future episode. Yes! Thank
Deal.
you,
It's
Ryan
coming.
Bailey.
It's coming. Very good. Listener, thank you very much for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye!